not expecting
Sure
that.
is.
I was not expecting it to go from "don't touch me like that" to "I'm gonna make you moan." You know what I mean? That's a pretty big swing. I'm not mad at it, but I was like,
Nope.
okay, this is where we're at now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Book of Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are discussing Queen of Shadows, chapters 48 through 56, and when I tell you that my jaw was on the floor this entire section, I am not kidding. I had to do that thing where you force yourself to read one line at a time with your bookmark. Like you can't skip ahead because I was like reading so fast that I was barely processing anything. And I was like, okay, I need to slow down so I don't miss anything.
Oh, you threw it back to like third grade reading strategies, or you're like, process the
absolutely.
information, focus on what
Yes.
you're reading. Yeah, I don't blame
Don't
you.
read ahead.
Even when I was note taking and like I'd already read it, I still was like, oh my God. Like I just could not wrap my head around all of it. I'm still not sure I fully processed it. So thank God we're doing this because I am dying. This is the point, I think, where people are like, no, you'll see it takes off. And I mean, it has been, but I thought that Arabin shit was exciting. Arabin who? This is where it's at.
But we weren't even done with Arabin. That's the crazy thing. I was like, from the fucking grave, he came back and pulled some shit. I was like,
we'll
why?
never be done with him.
Okay, as you can see, we're very excited. So as a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 48, 56 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes Tab, TOG, Com, and Hoff. Otherwise, the series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, then next week's Queen of Shadows episode will cover chapters 57 through 64. And next, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
I know this sounds dumb. My gut instinct was to say every day we get a little closer, which is very accurate and obvious. But today is January 3rd, and there are 18 days until Onyx Storm is released.
Oh no, countdown.
I saw the funniest meme. It was like, Happy Year of the Onyx Storm to all those who celebrate. And I was like, yes, indeed. That's how I know this is going to be a good year.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
With jaw-dropping satisfaction. Chapter 48. Manon carried out Astrid's punishment in the breakfast hall the next morning. Astrid didn't so much as flinch, and when it was done, she walked away without a word. Manon was then called to the Duke's chamber where he informed her that he wanted another coven of witches for the breeding, but this time he wanted Blackbeaks. He also told her that she and the 13 needed to mount up because he had a mission for them. Manon, the 13, the Duke, and Lady KALTAIN all flew through a vicious storm to a tribal village in the White Fang Mountains. Once they arrived, the Duke told KALTAIN to burn them all with her unholy shadow fire, and she complied. At this point, even Manon and the 13 were feeling uneasy at the sight of the panic and horror below, but when KALTAIN's fire magic ran out, the Duke ordered them to finish the job. Manon landed and drew Windcleaver, and then the screaming started anew. Chapter 49. It was only a matter of hours before Aelin signed all the documents the master of the bank brought over. They left the keep and headed towards home, but once they arrived, Aelin needed a walk to clear her mind. Rowan tried to follow, but Aedion stopped him, realizing that what she really needed was someone to listen. They had a tear-jerking heart-to-heart that once again reaffirmed my love for Aedion. Rowan was half asleep by the time Aelin returned to the bedroom. He tried to act business as usual, but it was obvious Aelin was still upset from what happened the night before. Rowan began to try and explain what he meant, but Aelin cut him off and told him she needed some sleep. The next day, Aelin and Lysandra pretended to be two fancy rich ladies in need of an opium fix and on the hunt for a new dealer. Wow, there's a sentence I never thought I'd write. They asked for Nellie because she was supposed to make them a brambleberry pie, and they were jonesing for some. As they waited, they too had a heart-to-heart, which also reaffirmed my love for Lysandra. After a hefty bribe, Nellie told them they could find a pie dealer in the catacombs beneath the sewers. And can I just say, damn, does everywhere in this fucking series have a catacomb that hides some secret important shit? How many more catacombs are we going to go into?
I'm convinced they're everywhere in the city. I think
They have to be.
whoever lived there before, the ancient groups of people and stuff, they must have created something. And then I think the city was just built on top of it. Like
The Sun Eater
at this
is
point.
living down there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Among other gods and goddesses, perhaps.
Immediately afterwards, Aelin, Adian, Rowan, and Kale headed to the abandoned Shadow Market, where Aelin told them they weren't just looking for any old pie. They were looking for hellfire pie. Chapter 50. Hey, did you know that Gavin and Elena were fucking liars and never actually slayed Erewhon, but instead put him to sleep, then buried him in a tomb under the Black Mountains? And did you also know that in the ancient language, the Black Mountains translates to Morath? Because we sure fucking didn't. And neither did Aelin, Adian, Rowan, and Kale. Oh, and they found the hellfire. Chapter 51. The 13 were holding an intervention for Manon, and things were getting heated between Astrid and Manon. No surprise there. When they were interrupted by none other than Roland fucking Cavaliard and the Valg prince that infiltrated him. The witches are thrown into immediate darkness and turmoil, but Manon was able to quickly recover and launch herself at Roland. The Valg and Roland fought back, but Astrid too recovered and was able to jump in and help. They quickly killed Roland, and Manon tells him this was a reminder. Later on, Manon cornered KALTAIN to get some answers, but all she got was immeasurable pain from KALTAIN's shadow fire. And then KALTAIN walked up the stairs and vanished as if nothing had happened. Manon could still feel the echo of pain reverberating through her bones. Slaughtering that tribe with one cleaver, she told herself, had been a mercy. Chapter 52. Hey, remember that time Rowan punched Aelin and told her that the world would have been better off if she had died 10 years ago? Well, I sure fucking don't. Not anymore. Just kidding. I absolutely do. But damn if Rowan in a towel talking dirty to Aelin did not make me forget, at least for a little while. Believe it or not, that was actually not the most important thing that happened in this chapter. We learned from Nesrin that the king has a giant fucking army in Morath, and he has a host of 3,000 bloodthirsty Iron Teeth witches who have been training in combat with their wyverns. If that wasn't bad enough, Aelin stormed off with Rowan in tow to process everything she had just learned, and she was ambushed by Lorcan, who actually was there to help them. Seems like Lorcan is the new frenemy. He tells him he wants to destroy the word keys and offers Athrel's ring in exchange, which fucking turns out was forged by Mala herself. Thanks, Mala. And makes the wearer immune from the Valg's powers. And I think that was about it. Wait, did I mention that Rowan and Aelin almost kissed?
There were so many moments, and I was so tired of them
my
not
God.
kissing.
Literally.
Chapters.
Literally. Chapter 53. Yep, it's time to kill Dorian. Chapter 54. Elite continued her plans to make her escape because the supply wagon would be arriving any day now. While Manon received a summons to attend a meeting in the Oakwald Forest with her grandmother and the king of Otterland himself, even though Manon thought the meeting was a stupid waste of time, as usual, she obeyed Granny Blackbeak and departed. Remember when we said, don't sleep on Lady KALTAIN? Boy, were we fucking right. Turns out KALTAIN had been biding her time and growing her power until she was strong enough to destroy the Valg inside of her. And now she was biding her time, waiting for her true purpose to be revealed. She'd forgotten her name, but it made no difference. She had only one name now, Death, Devourer of Worlds. Chapter 55. As if things couldn't get any worse, Aelin, Rowan, and Adian were all abruptly woken up by an intruder in the warehouse that turned out to be Evangeline. She tells them that fucking Urban Hommel sent a letter to the king outing Lysandra and her magic, and the king's men had taken her. Kale and Nesrin showed up as this was happening, and Nesrin and Kale both reassured Aelin that they would save Lysandra together. Chapter 56. The Fab Five grabbed their supplies and went to a ramshackle inn to make their plans for Lysandra's rescue. Once the plan was set, it was time for everyone to get some rest. But Rowan and Aelin, they definitely weren't doing any sleeping. Unfortunately, it was because our queen doesn't sleep well on lumpy beds at a shitty inn, and for no other reason. Fortunately for us, there was some very smutty flirting going on, and, well, the inn was rather loud. Perfect to cover any noise a nosy demi-fae cousin might overhear. But it was not the time, so they'd have to think about that later. After that, the only sound left in the room was Rowan as he walked toward the dresser and dumped a pitcher of cold water over himself.
That was hilarious.
I know. And that concludes the book report.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
Oh my word.
Oh my word. Thanks, Mala.
OMG, why?
Rapid fire thoughts.
Wow.
Truly wow. Yeah. So anyways, thank you for the book report. And we're not going to daddle. So let's get straight into the analysis.
Dwaddle.
Daddle? What is it? Is it
dwaddle?
Dwaddle?
Mm-hmm.
Really? I don't think I've ever heard.
Or there's dilly-dally.
Dally. Maybe I'm combining two things.
Dwaddle
Daddle.
to waste time, idle, trifle, loiter. Stop dwaddling and help me with these packages. Let's not dilly-dally.
Let's not dilly-dally. Okay. I'll say that again. All right. Let's not dilly-dally. So let's get into the analysis. And of course, we have overarching thoughts.
Yes, I'll try to make these quick because there's so much to get to. But of course, because it's the beginning of part 2, we have to do a little title analysis. Part 1 was called Lady of Shadows. We talked about what we thought that meant back in the very first episode of Queen of Shadows. Mostly that it represented the idea that she hadn't quite fully come into her queenhood because she still needed to gather her court and supporters. I want to also amend that to add that she was still living in the shadows of her past, specifically in relation to who she had been as Selena Sardothian. But now that Arobynn is gone, she can finally bury her and be free. Part 2 is called Queen of Light. I think this represents several things. The first is Aelin has now truly stepped into her role as queen. She has finally embraced her destiny and is making big plans to take back her throne. As I said earlier, she was still living in the shadows of her past, and now that Arobynn is finally gone, she can step into the light, so Queen of Light. And last, I think this set of chapters demonstrates this very well, but I think it plays on the idea that she's going to shine a proverbial light, so to speak, on all the dark secrets of Aurelia. Everyone was basically living in the quote-unquote dark about Gavin and Elena's secret, and there's lots of secrets. And Aelin is about to oust everyone and everything. Okay, she's going to expose them all. My next overarching thought in relation to this set of chapters is I am really, really disappointed in Manon. I feel like there's two conflicting character traits for her in this book. They are constantly at war, and it's driving me nuts. She's extremely smart and strategic and very loyal to the 13, and a lot of her actions display that goal for her character. But on the other hand, she's blindly loyal to Granny Blackbeak, and she's just not using her fucking brain. I mean, like, literally, the 13 had to stage an intervention for her, and she still didn't get it. I'm so frustrated, and I want her to wake the hell up. I want her to wake the hell up and start doing something. And last, as you said earlier, my jaw was basically on the floor the entire time. I mean, I was literally like, like, it was just constant gasping. I basically look like King Prawn the entire time. There are literally so many revelations. It would be too much to list them here. So we'll just get into it because I am dying, and I mean dying, to talk about it.
Yes, I totally agree. Fair warning to everyone that this is probably going to be a pretty long episode. We finally see how the plot is connecting and how all the bits of information we've gotten in previous books, like way at the beginning back in TOG.
Yes.
And all of those are now being mixed together to create a picture that honestly is terrifying for the people of Aurelia. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that because we have a lot to talk about.
A lot. Lorraine is vibrating with excitement right now. I wish you guys could see her. She's literally like,
Yeah. Okay. Starting with chapter 48. As promised, Manon gives Astrid 3 unblocked blows as punishment for her outburst and disobedience at the previous night's meeting with the 13. Despite Manon's inability to forget Astrid's reminder that she'd let them do this and a lead speech about hope to return home, it is incredibly frustrating that Manon ignores all of it in favor of continuing to be an obedient, unquestioning witch. All of the sides say otherwise, but I've reached my limit with her, and it seems like the rest of the 13 have as well.
Yeah, there's going to be a mutiny really soon if she doesn't do something. Also, I don't know why, but when I read this, it made me chuckle. Manon is thinking about Alid's preachy little speech, and she thinks, hope, what drivel. It doesn't surprise me. I just thought it was funny.
I know. She like thinks down about, well, I think she thinks of Elite as more obviously human than witch,
Oh,
even
yeah,
though she
yeah.
has witch blood and whatnot. But yeah. So after the breakfast blows, Manon arrives tardy to a meeting with the Duke, KALTAIN, and Vernon, where the Duke asks for another coven, and more specifically, he wants Blackbeaks. By this point, it's pretty clear that there is something distinct about the Blackbeaks in particular, because the Duke has been angling to get one of their covens pretty much this entire time. The only explanation he gives to Manon is that you are sacred vessels, and then he also states he has a mission for them later. Already at this point, and then thinking about the information that we get later, I really do wonder if somehow the Blackbeaks are closer to or have maintained a stronger lineage with the Valg somehow. And that's kind of why the Duke has been so keen on getting the Blackbeak specifically to breed with. I have more thoughts about this later, but the Blackbeaks are special, and there's a particular reason that he wants them. We also see a repetition of the statement, "You let them do this," replay in Manon's mind, which I feel like is there to signify Manon's growing unease regarding the morality of agreeing to the Duke's demands and what's clearly a very bad future for the witches if they continue down this path of obedience and letting the Duke do whatever he wants.
I think the phrase, "you let them do this," has some double meaning for her at this point. The literal, which is Astrid saying this to her, but I think it's also mingled with their Croc and Witch's words. They made you this way, but now you are choosing to continue this way. You are letting them do this. And that's why she just keeps replaying it over and over again, because Manon needs to take back her power. She needs to be like,
Yeah.
Fuck all y'all. This is not happening. We're not doing this. Okay. I also love the quip back to the Duke after he tells Manon they're sacred vessels and it's an honor to be chosen. Manon says, "I find that a very male thing to assume." And I was like, tell him, girl. You tell him.
Shortly after the 13 fly for this mission from the Duke, as they are flying, Manon notes she had to get out, had to remember the bite of the wind on her face, what unchecked speed and unlimited strength were like. And immediately, this made me think of, there's like this metaphor about a frog in boiling water. If you haven't heard it before, the story goes, if you put a frog in boiling water, it will immediately jump out because the shock of it is extremely noticeable. But if you put it in tepid water and slowly boil it over time, the frog will die because it didn't realize what was happening. The lesson being that you may not notice or react to threats that occur slowly over time because there's an acclimation process. The witches are some of the strongest and fiercest beings in this world currently. And I think getting out to fly and being reminded of that strength is important for them. The witches took this deal to work with the king in order to get their home back in the future. But as time goes on, it seems the king and the Duke's demands are becoming more restrictive, and they have slowly been getting their freedoms limited. Every order that they follow just makes it easier or more likely for subsequent orders to be followed as their opportunities to exercise autonomy become less frequent.
Ooh, I have never heard that metaphor before, but I really like it. And I think it fits this situation perfectly. So very well said.
KALTAIN rides with Manon while the Duke rides with Sorrel, and as they descend upon the wild tribes of the White Fang Mountains, it becomes clear why the Duke had sent the 13 out to scout the area previously. The Duke commands KALTAIN to burn all the houses with her shadow fire, as well as the people. And Manon, of course, is the vehicle to ferry her around. We also see that a large part of the reason for destroying this tribe was because there were rebels among them. It's heartbreaking to read the destruction that follows from all the people shrieking and dying from literal pain, but it's also terrifying to see how deadly KALTAIN's fire is. Not to mention, they did all of this without ever landing, which makes KALTAIN and the pairing of doing it with the wyverns extremely valuable as a weapon for the king's endeavors, because they're the only ones that can fly, right? Like, unless you're gonna point some arrows and shoot them down or something, you know?
I didn't even think
really
about
scary.
that, right? Basically minimal effort on their part.
The Duke commands Manon to land and put an end to it as she once again recalls Astrid's words, "You let them do this." And then she reflects on how she'd also been the one to scout the tribe for the Duke. As this is going on, Sorrel also gives Manon a look that to me signifies she's for sure questioning the morality of all of this as well. You can tell Manon's inner conscience is just screaming at her and reminding her of how wrong all of this is, but she just can't get herself to look past it yet. Ultimately, Manon is caught in a pretty difficult position. She has a responsibility to lead the witches to the best long-term outcome for them, and yet what they want the most is intricately connected to following and obeying someone else, which in a way contradicts how the witches generally operate, like as a species and as an entity. This is evidenced by all the instances where Manon attempts to assert control by trying to tell the Duke off, or in this case where she thinks any other day a good bloodletting would have been enjoyable, but at his order. In the end, she has to ignore her instincts and face the scrutiny of the rest of the 13 because she doesn't have a better option at this time to get to their ultimate goal of getting back to home.
I know we're going to give Manon a really hard time, probably a lot in this set of chapters because of her choices, and we will probably continue to do so. But I do want to say, I think a lot of her choices and subsequent actions are a result of the fear she feels for the 13's safety. Between Granny Blackbeak and the Duke, the 13 is the fastest way to get to Manon and to punish her, right? It's the best leverage they have against her. And although Manon pretends that, she's heartless and doesn't care, she clearly cares very, very deeply for the 13, even at the expense and price of other witches' safety and well-being. And so I do try to remember that the 13 doesn't know that Granny was like, I'll kill them if you step one toe out of line, right? But at some point, they just need to be like, we have wyverns, we're going to leave and come and get us.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bitches.
Bye, bitch witches, basically.
So even Abraxos is slow to land and clearly does not approve of Manon following the Duke's orders, but I do think it's interesting that all this energy expenditure really takes its toll on KALTAIN. Not only had KALTAIN just sagged into Manon after stopping the shadow fire, it's also noted that the lines of her body were locked tight as if frozen despite the fur she'd been wrapped in. I definitely think KALTAIN is experiencing the early stages of burnout, but I do wonder if simultaneously the freezing thing that's described is related to her attempting to fight off the Valg's control, because we do see in later chapters that she has managed to fight it back. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't think about the freezing in that way. I took that more having to do with whatever's going on with whatever's in her arm and whatever Valg thing is going on with her. My guess, though, I think you're right, similar to Burnout, is that her magic is a well, just like Rowan described to Aelin in Heir of Fire. Yeah. I do wonder if they're going to try and train up her resistance so she can use greater amounts over long periods of time, like in a big battle, for instance. But also at the same time, knowing that KALTAIN has control. I don't know how those things are going to conflict, but it seems like KALTAIN doesn't mind her having shadow fire. In fact, she likes it. So she ain't mad about it. The Devourer of Worlds is here to play. So I don't know.
Manon considers killing KALTAIN, realizing how dangerous she was, but she knew the setting was too public to do such a thing and figured it would only lead to retaliation from the Duke later. I wondered if this is going to be a thing for Manon. Is she going to make more attempts to try and kill KALTAIN because of how dangerous she is? But these thoughts were kind of weird to me because in the end, I feel like that's kind of stupid to go for KALTAIN, because if she's bold enough to try and do that, then why not just go for the Duke or go for the other Valg instead?
Yeah. I didn't read it as her wanting to kill KALTAIN because of how dangerous she was. I read it more like a mercy killing because of the state she was in. Maybe it's a little bit of both. I mean, I do think everyone who's interacted with KALTAIN, even Manon, sort of feels sorry for her because it's clear she is a prisoner. This is all against her will. And so I read it more like a mercy killing, but probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm not quite sure yet. But combined with her threat later when she confronts KALTAIN, I kind of got the feeling that even if it would be a mercy, she's more concerned about the damage that KALTAIN can do if she remains alive. So I guess we'll see. Ultimately, she ignores Abraxos' disobedience and any reactions from the 13 as she lands and finishes off the remaining tribe members as instructed. Moving on to chapter 49. Having wrapped up the sale for Eribin's assets, Aelin, Rowan, and Adian arrive back in the slums. Rather than head home, Aelin continues walking toward the river, and this time it's Adian that goes after her to finally have a much-needed personal conversation with her. I loved everything about what Adian tells Aelin because at its core, he worries about her happiness and just wants to be able to help her more than anything else. He's not even mad that he's left out of her plans. He's bothered that being left out leaves all of the burden on Aelin to figure things out. I'm combining a couple of quotes here, but my favorite line from Adian was when he says, "When I became general, I let the lines blur too, but I was still in the north, still home among our people. You came here instead and had to grow up with those piece of shit men, and I wish I'd been here. I wish Arabin had somehow found me too and raised us together. You had to face those people alone."
Oh, I completely agree. This conversation was just so touching. And at its very core, Adian is just trying to empathize with the circumstances of Aelin's upbringing. I think at this point, he knows it's not his fault, and she doesn't blame him in any way, but it's an acknowledgement of the pain and suffering she endured and who she had to become to endure it. And I specifically loved when he told her, "The point is, I should have been there then, but I am here now. I'm healed, and let me share this burden." I think this sentiment is something Aelin has always longed for, and it's something she had in Sam, but obviously that was very short-lived. What she really wants and needs is someone to extend their heart and their hand without judgment whenever she needs it. And that's what Adian provides. And Rowan, too. And I guess kind of Nezrin and Kale, her circle is starting to grow, which is nice. Yeah. Her own cadre.
The found family.
The Fab Five.
The Fab Five, yeah. Equally touching is how Aelin wants to protect Adian in return when she tells him that even if he wanted to help, what could I ever ask of you that I couldn't do myself? Because despite what Adian thinks, Aelin does not feel that he is expendable. This is a theme that comes up a little bit later when Aelin is talking with Lysandra, but I think it's applicable to here as well. Aelin, as Queen of Terrasen, feels an enormous amount of pressure and responsibility to the people that support and serve her. And I think a lot of that pressure then manifests as a desire to control and do everything herself so that no one else has to die for her cause. The fact that she takes all of those lives lost so seriously is something that I really respect about Aelin. But at some point, she does need to accept help because everything else that needs to happen is like so monumental that there's no way that she can handle all of it alone effectively.
She literally doesn't have the time.
Heart to heart had, Aelin tells Adian her next plans include freeing magic, taking down the king, and killing Dorian. Though the only other detail she tells him is that Roland's working on the first leg of it. I'm just curious about what that entails as far as how Rowan's gonna figure out how to free magic or what his role in that is gonna be. We know they go hunting for some explosive later, but that is information Aelin and Lysandra gather, so I wonder what else Road is looking into.
Oh, I thought it was the stuff with Lorcan. That's what he was looking into, but maybe it's other things as well.
Could be, yeah. We switch to Rowan's perspective when Aelin returns to the apartment later on. Acutely aware of the cold shoulder she was giving him, Rowan offers that he track Lorcan around the city. Though he hadn't seen him anywhere, he states the scent was fresh unless he died an hour ago. He's still very much alive. And for some reason, I was like, a lurking Lorcan. I'm gonna call him from now on.
Vernon, lurking Lorcan.
Yeah. But as we see, his continued presence is for a very specific reason later on. Aelin gives a clipped response of good and emerges from the closet dressed in a flimsy pink silk nightgown that clears every single thought out of his head as he tries to avoid staring at her boobs.
That was so funny. It's still so jarring for me when I hear like sexual things come out of his brain or mouth. And I'm like, what? I also love when he thought, well, apparently she'd been mortified by their earlier encounter, but not enough to wear something more matronly to bed. I was like, matronly, ew.
Ew, I know. That makes her sound so old.
It was so funny.
Despite Rowan's extremely jarring response of, "Don't touch me like that," from the previous set of chapters, his true thoughts to explain his reaction did make me feel better. Rowan thinks Aelin might have an inclination to punish anyone who'd hurt him, but she didn't realize that he and Adian too might also have scores to settle on her behalf. Most interesting to me was he continues to notice her scent and how that scent had always struck him, had always been a call and a challenge. It had shaken him so thoroughly from centuries encased in ice that he'd hated her at first, and now that scent drove him out of his mind. We know that they are carried off, and that creates a very distinct bond between them. But when the whole scent drives me insane thing starts to come into play, it is just way too reminiscent of situations with other characters in the SJM universe that I think it would be a huge mistake to ignore it. Basically, I will keep fighting the good fight when it comes to my mate theory.
Okay. I'll give you this one. In fantasy books, it is common that distinct scents are often associated with mates. And there is quite a bit of talk about his pine and snow scent and all of that. So again, I'm not supporting it for obvious reasons, but I will say the evidence is in your favor on this specific issue.
It's piling up. It's adding up, okay?
It's adding up. But then why not just tell her?
Yeah, I guess, unless... Well,
anyways,
we need SJM to figure it out.
Well, think about that later.
Yeah. Roland puts aside all of his naughty thoughts about Aelin and attempts to correct his hard fumble from the night before by stating, "I didn't mean to snap at you." But Aelin is not in the mood for the conversation and chooses to go to sleep instead. Left alone with his thoughts, we learn that Rowan hadn't been prepared for how intense his feelings for Aelin really were, and that he'd been completely surprised by Aelin's reciprocity of feelings. We see that these feelings are novel because what he feels for Aelin is something he hadn't felt for anyone else since Lyria. He also thinks Lyria was dead, slaughtered, and Aelin, if he went down that road and if something happened to her, his chest seized at the thought. Rowan is terrified of opening himself up to love again because that person now becomes someone that he can lose. And especially considering their current circumstances, losing Aelin is actually much more likely to happen than it would if everything else was fine and dandy, you know?
Yeah. The peril is real, as we're about to see very shortly. I also think he feels immense guilt at quote unquote moving on to any meaningful relationship because he doesn't feel like he deserves to be happy or loved after he let Lyria die. And I don't mean he let Lyria die, but from his perspective, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. The next day, Aelin and Lysandra disguise themselves as wealthy women running an errand at Nesrin's family bakery. Their mission was to talk to Nellie, who was an opium addict familiar with the survivors of the Shadow Market's burning. Having placed her inquiry about a brambleberry pie, Aelin and Lysandra go on to discuss the aftermath of Arobyn's death. Most surprising to both Aelin and me was that Lysandra was no closer to being free of Clarice because she had increased all of their deaths to make up for the money she hadn't received from Arobyn's will. And I was like, OMG, why? Literally, what the heck? I guess I should have expected this, but it still surprised me, and it really freaking sucks. Plus, things only get worse for Lysandra from here. And I'm like,
I know. She's done so much to help everybody, and now she's just getting the shit under the stick. But also, at this point, I just don't understand why they don't just kill Clarice and be done with it.
Oh my gosh. For real.
Why not? I mean, you burned down the vaults. You're killing all the Valg. You killed Arobyn. Why not just clean up the city? Let's just clean house. I don't understand.
Yeah, free all the courtesans. Justice for the courtesans.
Justice for the courtesans.
Aelin immediately feels guilty for not having considered that possibility, but she goes on to ask how Lysandra was really doing after killing Arobyn and if she regretted it. Lysandra says, "No, I regret that I didn't tell him what I really thought of him. I regret that I didn't tell him what I'd done with you," to see the betrayal and shock in his eyes. We always think about Arobyn and how awful he is in the context of what he's done to Aelin, but I think this was a good reminder of just how much Lysandra has suffered at his hands as well. This just really freaking sucks because she may have killed him, but Arobyn still got the last word from his grave. And even if she had told him how she'd betrayed him, it didn't even matter because the motherfucker already knew.
Oh, it's funny that Lysandra feels that way because this is also how I feel. I remember after she killed him, I'm like, wait, what? I was just so desperate for this aha moment when Arobyn has the realization that he got by Aelin and Lysandra. I wanted him to be tied up and wondering what's happening for her to walk in and be like, that's right, Arobyn, it's me, Lysandra. And I'm going to fucking make you pay. And so honestly, I was a little sad that we didn't get that.
I know. It really ruins the satisfaction of his death, knowing
I know
that he had another trick up his sleeve. So, despite the heaviness of their conversation, I did find the next part kind of funny. And it was hilarious that Lysandra, she's like talking about her boobs and it's like, your dress makes everything like,
Looking
all of your
good. You're
assets
looking
look
great.
I know. And but instead she's like, as soon as I get my powers back, these things will be the first to go. And it's nice to see them have a normal conversation because it's so human and so like average. And it's reminiscent of conversations that I've definitely had with friends and other women in the past. More importantly, it's cute to see their friendship and comfortability with each other now. So much of just friendships with people is about just telling each other the most random things. And this is also something that's unique to her female friendships because it's not like she can go on and discuss something like this with Rowan or Adian and have them understand.
I mean, she could discuss it with Rowan, and I don't think he'd mind too much.
True.
I almost spit out my water when she said, "Trust me, having larger ones isn't a blessing. My back hurts all the time." I was like, you are so real for that, Lysandra. You are so real
It's
for
a
that.
real thing. As our conversation continues, I really love that Lysandra says she just wants to live in the wilderness someday because she may love luxury, but in the end, they're replaceable. I've come to value the people in my life more. And then shortly after, she tells Aelin, "I'm grateful for you." I really love this quote. Most things and events in life are truly replaceable, but people are not. And I know it's cliche, but good people really are hard to come by. So when you find them, it's just a nice little gift, you know?
I know. That's why I'm so lucky I have you.
Oh, and I'm lucky to have you too.
Aww.
Cute moment for the podcast and our listeners as well. We are grateful for you guys too.
Yes. I like you guys better than Lorraine, just so you know. No, I'm just kidding.
Redact that statement immediately.
Okay, redacted. You guys are nothing to me. It's only about Lorraine.
As it should be. They are then interrupted by Nellie, who pulls through with some very important information. With some proper bribing, Nellie informs them that the specific man they were looking for had managed to escape through the sewers by finding the catacombs beneath them that had not been found by the Valg guards. Everyone demands to know what they learned once they meet back up outside, but Aelin only tells them to have patience. So I do have a little prediction to make. Aelin tells Lysandra that she bet the men would stop their snarling if she turned into a ghost leopard, and then combined with some of Lysandra's earlier comments about wanting to, shift into something new with claws and live in the wilderness, and then Adian going on to explain what a ghost leopard is, I wonder if she's going to make being a ghost leopard her official animal form or something when she gets her powers back.
Oh, I thought the exact same thing. I was like, yup, that's definitely foreshadowing. She's definitely going to favor a ghost leopard form, especially when Adian says, you can't really tell they're on you until you're staring right into their pale green eyes. And who has green eyes? Lysandra. And so as soon as I read that, I was like, yep, that's not random.
Chaol, Aelin, Rowan, and Adian next head to the ruins of the Shadow Market while Nezran escorts Lysandra back to the brothel. It is immediately revealed that burning copies of Eribin's will was not the reason Aelin had smelled like ash, and I was wrong. Instead, Rowan realizes that the ash smell was because she'd been sneaking around searching in the ruins of the Shadow Market.
Yeah, whoops, we totally missed the mark on that one.
Chaol also realizes that Aelin crashing the rebel meeting with Brello and Ress had been a cover for her to find the stash of hellfire from the man she and Lysandra had asked Nellie about. And yet again, I was completely surprised by this plan within a plan situation.
Oh my God, this is some real Inception level shit here, okay? A dream within a dream within a dream. How many levels are we going to go? Because it just keeps getting more and more intricate.
We learned that hellfire is a substance that is incredibly lethal, and just about of it could take out half of the castle's retainer wall. And I was like, oh, wow, sounds like exactly the item that she will need to blow up a certain clock tower.
Oh, girl, she ain't gonna blow that place up. She's gonna fucking melt it off the face of the earth, okay? She's going to melt it.
The man ultimately had never told Aelin anything about the hellfire, but Aelin knew he had to have a supply of it because he had some of the ingredients to make it in his shop. Since Rifthold hadn't been blown to smithereens when the king had destroyed the market, Aelin also figured that the hellfire had to still be stashed somewhere nearby, and what better place than somewhere deep in the catacombs below? The pieces of another puzzle come together again when Aelin reveals that she got the idea from Arobin when he mentioned the man had been caught and killed on sight by the king's men 2 days ago, leaving his stash of hellfire free for the taking. Literally, every chapter of part 2 has been so filled with all of these incredible surprises. I thought we were going to have to wait until like the last 10 chapters to get some big reveals, but I am 100% on board for all of these early reveals and action sequences.
It makes me wonder, are the last 10 chapters going to be like even more mind-blowing? Because that's how SJM does. And that's also how this series has gone so far. So even though this is exciting, it's just not really the real exciting thing. When you put it in that context, you're like, wow, oh my God, let's pause and go read.
Pause and go read. Can't read fast enough. All right, chapter 50. Upon descending into the tunnels and down into the catacombs, things start to get weird. There are skulls and bones everywhere in the walls, and Chaol says, legend has it the Shadow Market was built on the bones of the god of truth. And then Rowan adds that this catacomb in particular was actually a temple, as indicated by the altars and dark reflection pool. The red flags start to go up as soon as they start reading some of the writing on the wall. The writing turned out to be confessions of sins committed by many people over the years, and Adian states, seems like this god of truth was more of a sin eater than anything. You should read some of the things people wrote, the horrible things they did. I think this was a place for them to be buried and to confess on the bones of other sinners. So first of all, from all the way back in DOG, we had been asking what the heck else was probably laying in these catacombs that exist. As far as I can remember, I think we just thought these catacombs only existed, under the library or just generally around the castle, or at least that's what I thought. But it's obvious that there's a network of them underneath the whole city. And now I can only wonder what else exists within the catacombs, since clearly they extend much farther outside the perimeter of the castle. Second, immediately when they started discussing the bones and this god being the god of truth and a sin eater, my brain beelined for a certain bone-loving character in another SJM series. I don't know enough yet to have any further analysis or insight about it, but it is feeling very familiar.
I gotta say, that did not even occur to me, so that's a brilliant catch. But also, in my defense, I basically blacked out after they started talking about Erewhon, and so I was not able to do any mass first connections because I was literally unwell.
The crew heads further and further into the temple where they found all sorts of treasures, though none of it actually looks like treasure. This is just a random thought. I don't know if there's any ramifications for stealing from a sin eater, but I totally think that they should have taken those jewels and money because honestly, you can never have enough money for their cause. So.
On the one hand, I'm like, that's bad juju. You shouldn't take it. But on the other, I'm like, well, can it really get any fucking worse? You may as well, right? Ooh, what's going to happen? You're going to call the Dark Lord Erewhon back? Too late.
He's already back.
I like how it's just speculation and we're already like, oh my God, he's back. I mean, to me, it's canon. He's back, obviously. That's the big bad of the series. It has to be.
It has to be. Yeah, totally. I agree with that. Aside from this, we just get so much interesting information in this chapter. So I hope everybody is comfy because we're diving deep today. Aelin notes that the language gets older the farther back they go, but one phrase dated 900 years ago in particular makes me freak the fuck out with the revelation that Aelin has. She pieces together 900 years ago coincided with Gavin and Elena's time and that the god of truth reminds her of Damaris. As a reminder, Damaris was known as the sword of truth, and it allowed the bearer to see the truth when they wielded it. Aelin goes on to wonder, if Mala, a goddess, could bless Brannon and the Sword of Goldrin, then perhaps there really had been a god of truth, aka the Sin Eater, who had blessed Gavin and Damaris. And I was like, mind blown emoji.
Ooh. Yes, this whole little sequence was just so exciting. And then I love at the end when she whispered, what sins do you confess to, Gavin? I literally got goosebumps. I was like, oh, something is about to happen. I was like getting tingly.
Yes. And this also immediately brings to mind our discussion from last episode surrounding Rowan's comment in chapter 44 when he had said, "Trust me, your ancestors weren't utterly holy." There is so much we do not know about Gavin, Elena, Brannon, and just like the whole history of this world. But it's clear that there was something nefarious that occurred, and I'm extremely curious about what actually happened in the past. I feel pretty strongly it's related to the Valg in some way, but other than that, I have no idea what it could be.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. Although I do want to point out that Gavin is not Aelin's ancestor. At least I'm pretty sure he's not. So it is evocative of that conversation, but I just want to make sure I clarify that. Elena, I guess, would be because descendant of Brannon, but Gavin he married into the family.
He did, but he is a Haviliard. So could it be in relation to something about the King and Dorian? You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. All these people from the past, they have some explaining to do.
They really fucking do. I think I have a note about that later, but I was kind of like, fuck Elena Haviliard, okay? I'm not her biggest fan in this moment.
Aelin continues farther into the temple's tunnels, where she next finds a wall made of pure stone, white marble, and carved in word marks. And in the center was a giant rendering of the Eye of Elena. Aelin also notes that it's extremely cold, and this brings to mind the coldness that Elite had also felt when she descended down the stairs of the castle in Morath to investigate what was happening to the Yellowlegs witches. But to get back to this particular scene, once Aelin steps up to the stone, Damaris turns icy in her hands and she drops it, which causes the stone wall to start shifting the word marks into a new arrangement. Aelin, at that moment, remembers the riddle from Elena's tomb that had said, "It is only with the eye that one can see rightly." And once again, it is amazing how many secondary meanings there have been from all of these clues. Also, this scene is extremely reminiscent to me of another SJM series, and I don't think that's a coincidence. If you know, you know.
At this point, I was struggling so hard from trying to pick my jaw up off the floor. Aelin says, "Honestly, I don't know why these coincidences keep surprising me." And I was like, same girl, same. But here I am, once again, absolutely shook. Should I be surprised?
Shook.
No. But are we? Yes.
Yes. Aelin starts interpreting the word marks, which describe the first king and queen of Otterlin, aka Gavin and Elena, but then goes on to discuss the war. After the very first war, there was another round of demon wars that occurred with the Valg that had been left in the world. This demon war was led by one of the three kings, the king who remained trapped here after the gate was sealed. And it says to look upon a Valg king was to gaze into madness, despair. He could take any form, but he appeared to them now as a handsome man with golden eyes, the eyes of the Valg kings. They did not know his name, so they called him Erewhon, the Dark King.
I hear your voice. I'm hearing the King Prong meme music.
Yep. There are so many thoughts that arise from this first bit of info, so here we go. First, the explanation of feeling madness and despair from looking into the eyes of a Valg king checks out with everything we have learned that people feel from being infected with a Valg demon in general.
I also want to point out for some world building that Erewhon is one of the three Valg kings that exist. He's the only relevant one at this time in the series because he is the only one who's trapped here after the word gate was sealed. So it does make me wonder if the other Valg kings are going to come up, if that's going to become an issue, especially if we have three word keys in play and someone's going to be opening a gate. I don't know, but I did want to point that out.
Second, those gold eyes.
Those gold eyes.
We first learned about the gold eyes being significant in the context of the witches. When we first meet Manon in Heir of Fire, we learn that gold-flecked black eyes were an heirloom of the Blackbeak's clan's purest bloodline. When Granny Blackbeak had seen that Manon had wholly pure dark gold eyes, not gold-flecked, she'd immediately been made heir to the Blackbeak clan. Now that we know Erewhon had gold eyes as well, is Manon actually a direct descendant of Erewhon specifically? We know all witches are a product of Valg and Fae, but perhaps Manon's lineage in particular is extra strong. I don't know how it all connects, but it's definitely important. And I also have more thoughts about this in the next chapter.
Oh, I completely agree. As soon as they started talking about gold eyes, I shot up so fast, my soul almost left my body. Okay. I was like, say that again, gold eyes. As you said, we will talk about this in the next chapter with the witches, but the connection between gold eyes cannot be ignored.
Third, Erewhon was first mentioned in TOG by Elena and Dorian. Dorian recalls a tale from the Dawn of Otterland that said Gavin and Elena had been defenseless until a spirit gave Elena a necklace that is now known as the Eye of Lena, which allowed her to see him for what he was and call him by his true name. This distracted Erewhon and allowed Gavin enough time to slay him. Obviously, I want to know who the spirit was that gave the eye to Elena. Was it Mala? Because Mala seems to be like heavily involved with the Galathinius family. So
I know all that talk about Deanna in the first books, and now we've like totally shifted gears to Mala. I'm like, oh yeah, yep. Deanna who? It's all about Mala, baby. I would also like to know what Erewhon's true name is. It begs the question, is the name itself important and meaningful, or did it actually just like literally fucking shock Erewhon to hear a mortal speak it? Either way, the name feels really important. And I think that's going to come up.
I totally agree. There's something weird to me about how the Valg never tell anyone their names.
Yeah.
And their home world is unknown. And then obviously this whole situation with Brandon and his descendants being nameless. I can't say for certain that these things are connected. Never say never. But I don't know. Why is everybody keeping their names a secret? Okay.
Well, you can't ignore that it's happened at least twice that I can think of, but I think maybe even more than that, when someone asks a Valg, what's your name? And they're like, you cannot speak it in your tongue. That's a reoccurring event that has happened in multiple instances with different Valg. Now I'm like, wait, once is an introduction, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is intention. And so it is starting to build up that I'm like, that's probably not a coincidence. Also, Lorraine, we are so fucking in sync right now. And I just realized I actually wrote the band name in sync instead of writing SYNC. That's okay. Yeah. It's canon for me. I'm always going to write it like that. But as soon as I read that they did not know his true name, I was basically foaming at the mouth because, as I've mentioned several times on the pod, this is one of my favorite tropes. Big thing in the Inheritance Cycle series. But also, nameless is my price. Nameless is my prize. Damn it, Baba. Can she just come back and tell us what the fuck she meant by that? We're not done with that. Even if SJM is done with it, we're not done with it.
Absolutely not. Knowing what we know now and how the witches are involved and how the high witches are like keeping shit from the other clans and doing something kind of secret, they had to know way more. Right? Like
they had to.
Baba telling her about Nameless is my prize, the Valg and the word keys. There's just more. There is more. To get back into the temple info, Aelin next reveals that they did not slay him, referring to Erewhon. Instead, the eye contained him only for a short time. And then she also kind of corrects and says not contained, but put to sleep. And she asks that as a question. So they built him a sarcophagus of iron in some sort of indestructible stone, and they put it in a sealed tomb beneath a mountain, a crypt so dark that there was no air, no light.
I want to pause here for a second and just say this now. Aelin is by no means an expert at word marks, and she even comments on how difficult it is to read them and that it takes her a long time. It happens multiple times during her translation, but specifically here when she says, but put him to sleep, as you said, in a questioning way. It's as if she herself is unsure of her translation. And I just want to point that out because it's possible that some of what's being translated here could be wrong. And that misinformation could cause us problems later down the line. Now, the essence of what is happening, I think is true. I don't think like she's that far off base. But I feel like there is some purposeful kind of confusion or whatever that implies this translation might be 100% accurate. And there may need to be some like reinvestigation on what exactly they mean by put to sleep or whatever.
Yes. Aelin goes on to ask everyone what Black Mountains would be in the old language, and drum roll please, it's Morath.
Oh my
I
God.
was internally screaming.
I wasn't. I was externally screaming.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't. I think I was in the car or something when I was reading all this. So
Doesn't matter. Should have done it.
I know. Right. But this explains why Morath just felt weird to me. I had a bad feeling and felt like there was just more going on there. Now we freaking know why. But more disturbing is the fact that Erewhon is not dead. In fact, as they go on to speculate, the king, in addition to having word keys, has also likely raised Erewhon.
Our jaws are just on the floor. We have no words. We can't even speak. No, I was so fucking excited about this revelation. And then after 2 minutes, I was like, oh no. Quickly built up where I was like, oh shit.
So ever since they first mentioned Erewhon, or maybe not the very first time, but definitely by the end of TOG for sure, we definitely had a feeling that Erewhon was not done yet. He was going to come back. And sure enough, he was not done.
Oh, absolutely. I actually remember the exact moment we said that. It was during the scene when Selena and Dorian were taking a little stroll through the garden and he asked her about her necklace and he was like, oh, that's odd. It looks like the eye of Elena. And she was like, what? No, that's crazy. No. And then Dorian told her that fake ass story about Gavin and Elena. And you and I were both like, that's going to become relevant again somehow. And man, woo! I'm so proud of us.
Oh, gosh.
It feels good and bad to be right about that.
Aelin asked what Nesrin had posed earlier, which is why now? Why bring the Valg over now after a decade in possession of 2 keys? And Chaol responds, it would make sense if he's doing it in anticipation of raising Erewhon again, to have an army ready for him to lead. Before the chapter ends, Aelin determines they would have to bring magic down before the summer solstice, which is happening in 10 days, when her power would be the greatest. And then she asks Adian, tell me you found a lot of hellfire. And I was like, 10 days? Are you serious? The timeline just exponentially shrank.
And massively compressed.
Now they need to move really freaking fast, and I am stressed for them.
You should be stressed. We should all be very stressed.
Yep. Moving on to chapter 51. This one had big witch energy. Massive witch download chapter. Later on, Manon's meeting with her 13 reveals a twist for their hierarchy, and it turns out the rest of the coven not only disapproved of giving in to the Duke's demands, but had also had a pre-meeting without her. We get a little more context to the discontent, with Sorrel clarifying they wouldn't defy Manon, but we defy that human worm's right to use our bodies as if they were his own. And Astrid adding, you might as well name the 13, for we would sooner that be our fate than hand over our sisters. I have so much respect for Astrid and the others for choosing to sacrifice themselves rather than condemn another coven to this breeding experiment. It's the definition of true leadership. Rather than hiding and allowing others to take the fall, they're willing to do it themselves. And they are so committed to it that Astrid also adds, we are no one's slaves. If the price for that is never returning to the wastes, then so be it.
Oh, it's such a crazy sacrifice for them to even consider, let alone to offer. If you think about how often it's described that the witch's entire goal of existing is to get back to the ways, for them to be like, well, if this is what we have to do to protect our sisters. And they're not just talking about other Blackbeaks. They're talking about Yellow Legs, Blue Bloods. They're talking about all the witches. Yes. I love the 13. I love them. I want to be in the 13 so bad, but also not because I'm scared of them. But
Astrid's take brings up a discussion of what home really means. Is it about having a specific place to go, or can home be anywhere as long as you are true to your identity? I think home can mean many different things for different people, and we see that this difference in viewpoints is becoming a bigger point of tension between Manon and Astrid, in addition to the tension over, just obedience and witch dynamics shifting as a whole. I also thought it was interesting that Sorrel says, there are things you need to hear. This is another instance of Manon not thinking about the right things. She's so distracted by disobedience that she doesn't even try to investigate what Sorrel says. But I really want to freaking know. Unfortunately, Astrid's challenges to Manon's authority lead to distraction. Manon is about to rip into Astrid when they are interrupted by the golden-haired man with a black stone collar around his neck. Roland has entered the chat.
First of all, we called that shit. We knew it was Roland. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it doesn't matter. Also, I just want to point out here, Astrid's eyes are described as gold-flecked black eyes. I honestly can't remember if we've noted that before for Astrid specifically, but with all the talk about gold eyes, I definitely want to point it out here. I don't ever remember that coming up before. I think it's intentional that that description is thrown in here with this conversation and then what's about to happen in the next few seconds, pages, notes, chapters, whatever. You know what I mean? But I didn't remember her having gold in her eyes. I didn't really remember anyone having gold eyes except for Manon.
Yeah, they don't talk much about them until now. So before anyone can react, the man releases a wave of darkness that crashes into the witches. Manon again recalls the Kraken witch's words, "We pity you for what you do to your children. You force them to kill and hurt and hate until there is nothing left inside of them, of you. That is why you are here, because of the threat you pose to the monster you call your grandmother when you chose mercy and you saved your rival's life." I think in the context of the events happening now, ultimately, the danger of the witches following Granny and being obedient and cruel above anything else makes them most susceptible to control by the Valg. If they are taught to embrace these traits the Valg have as well, there is less pushback when the Valg use the witches in all of these horrific ways. The twist is, Granny and the other High Witches probably believe that this obedience and desire to be chosen by the Valg because of their cruel nature will earn them, some greater power in the future. But the irony of that is that this perceived similarity is what makes the witches more likely to end up under the thumb of the Valg.
Oh.
I think we as people do this all the time. It's human nature to instinctively trust people a little more when we find similarities with them. But that can sometimes be a pitfall because superficial similarities are not enough to prove someone is good or trustworthy.
You're so insightful. I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. And you're like dropping these knowledge, truth bombs about societal problems. And I'm just like, wow, Rowan is hot. You're making me like really shallow and stupid. So thank you for that. I also thought it was interesting that the Valg and Roland is making all the witches relive their fears. And this is what comes up for Manon. We've known basically since it happened that the Kraken witch's words deeply affected her. She hears it echo in her mind very frequently. But this is pretty strong evidence that it is her worst fear. I think we're going to continue to see her unravel over this thought until it basically forces her to make a choice. I'm wondering if she's still just kind of holding out this last little hope when she sees Granny at the meeting. And then when Granny's like, shut up, Manon, and do what you're told, then she's going to be like, you know what? Enough is enough. So that's what I'm hoping. But we'll see.
I hope so, because
it's getting old.
Granny, you probably didn't get my messages. And I'm like, no, Manon.
She definitely did.
Did. And she is hiding shit from you. Oh my gosh. Ugh. We do see that the demon Valg and Roland is attempting to feed on the witches in some way, and Manon is surprised to hear some of the 13 scream with fear and pain for the first time ever. Manon manages to grab the Valg by the throat and demands to know if he was sent here, but for a moment, Roland's eyes turn green again and he pleads for her to kill him. Just before she does, the demon takes over, but interestingly, he screams, "Get away," upon seeing Manon's gold eyes. Manon notes that Ghislaine, Thea, Kaya, Etta, Briar, and Fallon had all been drained of color, while the rest were unharmed. The affected witches all had ordinary eye colors of brown and blue and green, while the unaffected ones had black eyes flecked with gold, or Manon had purely gold eyes. Since Manon isn't gonna think about it.
When I read that, I was like, oh my God. Normally, it kind of makes sense. You're like, wow, there's a lot going on. But in this instance, I'm like, no, I think this is like pretty much the time. This is your sign that this is the time.
How could you not? I don't even think I could ignore something like that if I tried. I can't just push that out.
Right? I would be like, wow, that was so crazy. Why did he freak out when he looked into my gold ass eyes? I don't know.
So ultimately, I think the lesser Valg demons and Valg princes recognize those gold eyes as Erewhon's. And this similarity is exactly what makes me think that Manon is likely a direct or pure descendant of Erewhon through her lineage somehow. Perhaps in addition to her eye color, she's also inherited extra powers of some sort that we have yet to see since magic is currently gone. But I am willing to bet that the more gold a witch has in their eyes, the more closely linked they are to Erewhon.
I totally support your theory, but it also seemed to me that they were all initially affected by the Valg. It was just a matter of how much and how quickly they recovered. Manon seemed to be the least affected. It seems like she had a quick vision of the Kraken and then came back to reality, so to speak, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then Astrid came to and was able to help Manon kill Roland. So to me, that says the more gold you have in your eyes, the more resistant you are.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like the higher concentration or whatever. Like it's really something that's probably in your blood, but it manifests in the deepness or the quantity of gold in your eyes. I also want to point out, you know who else has gold in their eyes?
I don't know. I can't think of it.
Aelin, Ash River Galathinius, Ash River eyes.
That's
turquoise with gold. Yep. I don't know what that means, but since we're going to be talking about eyes a lot, remember our eye color theory? We thought like green eyes are evil. So we were like wrong, obviously, but we were not totally off base that eye colors are significant for a variety of reasons.
They do have some meaning. The eye thing is really interesting because, again, the Kraken witches, who are more like the Fae, are also part Valg. And so who's to say the Valg haven't somehow just been breeding with all kinds of beings and creatures in Aurelia for all of these freaking years? What if everybody's just related to the Valg? Like, that's the big
You know, I'm wondering if they all essentially descended from that, right? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm just noting that Aelin has gold in her eyes. For what purpose and what that means, I don't know. But obviously, the gold eye thing is going to continue to come up and be important.
I guess not just Aelin, but all of the Ash Rivers in that case.
That's true. Yeah. Oh my God.
Manon states this was a reminder before commanding they get rid of the body, and then she exits the room. Manon finds KALTAIN and corners her to ask some extremely interesting questions. So I'm going to give all the info we learned first and then give thoughts after that. She asks about her shadow fire, and KALTAIN states it was mine to start, and then it was melded with another source, and now it is the power of every world, every life. Manon is also informed that the collars can't be removed and that ultimately the Valg want kings, mighty kings, not you. KALTAIN then gives her a small dose of her shadow fire, which I'm just noting this because I'm compiling some evidence about how her shadow fire actually makes people feel. But Manon feels as if her bones were melting, her iron nails had become molten ore, and her blood was boiling. She ends up jumping back and hisses, "I'm gonna kill you," as KALTAIN's face goes blank again, and she walks up the stairs. In that moment, Manon decides that slaughtering the tribe of wild men had been a mercy. Okay, the analysis of this information. In reference to KALTAIN stating the power had originally been hers, we get more explanation later in chapter 54. But fire-related power was something KALTAIN originally possessed. Could this mean she was a descendant of Brandon and Mala as well? Or is it possible for fire power to manifest from other lineages?
I'm going to say yes. I feel like based on the conversations we've had about Aelin's fire, it's all descendant from Mala. Like firepower is a gift from Mala. So in some distant way, I would think so.
KALTAIN also says that it was melded into another source and became the power of every world and life. As far as we know from way back in TOG, the word is the force that holds and governs all life in this world. We also learn that the mother goddess is just a spirit from one of these worlds and that she strayed through something called a word gate and found Aurelia in need of form and life. Supposedly, there was also an idea that before the goddess arrived, there was life, an ancient civilization, but somehow they disappeared, perhaps through the word gate. According to Aelin's convo with Baba Yellowlegs in Crown of Midnight, we learn that even one key could make someone immensely dangerous. Not enough power to open the gate, but enough to be a threat. The key themselves are pure power. Power to be shaped as the wielder wills it. Tempting, isn't it? And this is where I had my big idea about KALTAIN.
Okay, I'm excited. Guys, she put this in invisible ink, so I have no idea what's about to come out of her mouth.
And it's a giant ass paragraph.
It's a doozy.
So I am fully convinced that KALTAIN has come into contact with a word key. There has to be a word key stashed at Morath, because how else would they have released Erewhon from this lightless, airless crypt place, which honestly to me sounds like the in-between space between worlds that Elena tells Aelin about. Perhaps that exposure is what molded her innate magic into this deadly shadow fire, and why she says her power was melded into another source and became the power of every world and life. The keys are pure power, and anyone who has them would therefore have access to pure power, aka the power of the word, which governs all life. Now, we also know from previous chapters that we have some questions about whether you have to be in constant contact with the key to have its power, or if it just has to be in a general vicinity. We also know that the Duke implanted something in KALTAIN's arm. We've been on Scar Watch. And
literally.
We originally thought that maybe it was another sort of Valg enabling device, like the collars or the rings. But is it possible they stashed a key in her? Again, this is dependent on whether you need constant exposure to the key or not, but I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibilities. This also leads me to wonder, why KALTAIN? What is KALTAIN's innate magic? What is her lineage? Because she had to be pretty powerful already for a blended version of her power to become something as deadly as shadow fire.
Okay, wait. So let me process and rephrase back to you what you're saying. First, I really like your point about how his tomb sounds like the described in-between world. I think that sounds, I was like, oh my God, wait, yes, totally. So you think they took a key there to unlock Erewhon or unleash him, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then they just kept the key there, and then they put it in KALTAIN's arm?
Possibly. Or at least KALTAIN has been exposed to something like that. Because as far as we know, I don't think the collars of the rings themselves have that pure power. Those are just used as an access point for the Valg to get into the person's body, right? But what else? Like, because Aelin, even when they're talking about that key, she feels that pull in the amulet and Eye of Orinth. That's like the similar power. The word key, the key has the power of the word. And so exposure to that is the only way that you could then transform your power into the power of every world and life. You know, it's that specific phrasing.
I wrote this later, but I thought it was a word stone, because remember when they breed the witches, the Duke says they're just going to sew a bit of stone under their belly button so they can breed with the Valg. So I thought whatever's in her arm is the same thing they put in the Yellowlegs coven to help them breed or whatever.
That could be it too. I don't know.
I like your idea better though. Your idea is much more exciting.
We don't even know enough generally about word stones either. But from the bits of information that we have had, it seems like either exposure to word stones or word keys are the only thing that would get you close enough to like this power of the word, this all encompassing power of the world and the universe.
My only hang up with that, I don't think the king would leave a word key. Well, I guess you're saying exposure to. She may not have it with her, but like she's been exposed to it. Yeah, I don't know. That's a crazy thought, but it's also a good thought. A crazy good thought, if you will.
I just, like, how...
The language is too similar.
The language is too similar. What better way to fucking trap Erewhon
True.
than to use a word key somehow to like place him into... Because the word keys are the only things that can unlock the access points to other worlds and other spaces, other dimensions, yada, yada. And so I think you would kind of have to use a word key at bare minimum. And from what it sounds like, the king has 2 of the word keys.
Oh, definitely.
Just, I think one of them is probably with him. Morath is sounding more and more suspiciously like another place where maybe they stashed one. I don't know, but my crazy thought.
I know, but see, now I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm like, okay, let's play this out. If Erewhon has been raised, where is he and what the fuck is he doing? Why hasn't he just like...
Maybe it's like a Voldemort situation where he needs to be like fed.
It's like a baby Erewhon. A fetal Erewhon.
Yeah, he just needs to get some strength or something, okay? But aside from whatever my theories are about KALTAIN's exposure to a word key or whatever, and how ultimately her magic was blended to become this, it does seem that KALTAIN's situation confirms that innate magic can be blended with Valg power, word power, whatever it is, or the power of the keys to create a new type of power.
Oh, I think that's totally fair to say, which makes it really terrifying to wonder what they could do if they ever got a hold of Aelin or Rowan. Or even Maeve, honestly. Yeah. Or Lord. Right. I mean, really, any of them, like a lot of the really powerful characters, I'm like, that is not a smoothie I want to drink of. I do not want a Valg smoothie.
Absolutely not. Okay, lastly, I definitely believe that many of the gods and goddesses worshipped in Aurelia are actually beings from other worlds who have since disappeared or were banished through a word gate back to their original worlds or different ones. The Sin Eater definitely feels like an otherworldly being that had become a god over time. And I don't think he's still in Aurelia, but I kind of feel like he probably went back through a word gate or was like banished somehow and disappeared somewhere else. But over time, those creatures are now thought of as gods and goddesses in this world. We also now know that this breeding experiment with the witches has ultimately been for the Valg want new Valg kings, ones that are as powerful as Erewhon, supposedly. That is extremely terrifying, but this is what also makes me think that Manon and some of the Blackbeaks are somehow more closely related to Erewhon, and also why Blackbeaks are wanted. A pure breeding lineage to see if they can produce a Valg powerful enough to become a Valg king. But also, we know that it's possible Erewhon has already been released since he isn't dead. So, were the witches, aka the Yellowlegs. Actually, hold on. Wait, this part's probably not relevant anymore because I just remembered that it was a word stone that was being put in the witches.
Yes.
Okay.
But also,
I had this crazy thought where I was like, maybe they're being bred with Erewhon.
Okay, but no, also they have to impregnate them somehow. So who is impregnating them?
Erewhon?
No, that's what I'm saying though. No, like it's something about, okay, I'm just going off the cuff. So from KALTAIN, we learned she has this power, right? And the power flows through whatever is sewn into her arm. We're going to go with Wordstone. And so it would stand to reason that the Yellowlegs witches, the same thing is happening to them, right? They're being impregnated, I assume, in a traditional way. And whatever baby making stuff is going through, being channeled through that Wordstone. And that's how they're breeding these demon Valg babies. So who's impregnating them? This is such a weird conversation.
Really
this is so weird. And I'm not liking this. I feel weird about this. I feel weird discussing it, but I want to know.
I do too. Crazy. Okay. And then a secondary thought that I have in relation to all this is that if they have the keys, aka the king and whatever, why do they need to breed new Valg kings? As far as we know, the other Valg kings weren't killed. They were just banished to another realm. So why not just open the gates and get them instead of breeding with the witches?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why focus all the energy and effort on breeding when they could literally just go get the keys? It seems like that would be easier. Unfortunately, I have no answer for that. I don't have enough context. I don't have enough world building. I don't know, but it's a great question.
So many more questions arise from the information.
Oh my God.
So
right?
It never ends. The cycle continues. Okay, moving on to chapter 52. So it's been a while since we've gotten Chaol's perspective, and I'm pretty glad that we did. The tone has definitely changed as Chaol marvels how strange it was to finally be working with Aelin rather than arguing with her. The rebel movement in Rifthold has been dwindling as many rebels either fled or were choosing to relocate to other cities, but Chaol stays loyal to the cause, deciding he would keep doing it until he was the last rebel left in this city. He would stay to help them, to protect them. But if what they'd learned about Erewhon was true, gods help them all. I am very proud of Chaol for not backing down in his loyalties to the cause, but it does bring up the idea once again that as a human, Chaol is just so far out of his league with demons like the Valg now on the playing field. I honestly think if possible, maybe the best thing for the humans is to evacuate them to other places because that seems like the best way to keep them alive, temporarily at least, but they are also extremely limited on time now. So I guess even if they wanted to, it may not even be feasible to move everybody out of the city.
Honestly, that's probably what they should do, but they won't. They're just too honorable. It's really giving very give me liberty or give me death vibes. You know what I mean? Like
the foundation.
That's so Kael.
The Great Pilgrimage. Something I also enjoyed was how Kael notes Aelin and Rowan were a team, solid and unbreaking. He waited for that twist and tug of jealousy, but there was nothing, only a flickering relief, perhaps, that Aelin had Rowan. And then he thinks he must truly be feeling sorry for himself, he decided. I did feel this is a hugely important shift for Kael because it demonstrates that he's finally processed all the anger he felt toward Aelin. It seems to have realized that in the end, she is not the enemy in all of this, especially when he realizes Aelin was allowing him to have access to more information now, including like the location of hellfire. I hope that she continues to allow Kael to participate and be in the know with these things, because I think not knowing for Kael has been a large part of his unease and anxiety about Aelin's intentions prior to this.
I think so too. My hope is this is the beginning of healing for both of them, really. But specifically Kael, I think I'd like them to be friends and allies if that's possible. And it seems like it is. It also really got to me when Kael thought it had been nice to have one afternoon with no fighting, with no one hating him, to feel like he was part of their unit. And something I think we've overlooked when analyzing Kael's character is that he's basically a military man. He had a purpose and an important role in the castle, but more importantly, he had men at his command that were part of his quote-unquote unit. Even though he was in charge of them, they still all worked together for a common purpose. And now that's all been ripped away. And I think that really Kael is just out there on his own, completely unangered by any connection to anyone with no purpose. And I can only imagine how difficult that would be. I feel like I've read some news articles or studies about what it's like for veterans when they come back from war. And there's obviously a lot of difficulties in adjusting back from a war to normal life. But a big part of that is the support system they have in their unit. They literally spend all of their time together. They have a common purpose. And it's like a very deep connection that they forge. And Kael doesn't have that anymore. He doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have a unit. You know, he's just all alone. And so I think it was really nice for him to feel like he was a part of that and not on the outside.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Kael, defender baby. I still love my baby, okay? I haven't forgotten him.
Nesryn finds them outside the tunnels with the alarming news the king had been building an army down in Morath and that the Valg guards around Rifthold were just the first of them, and more are coming this way. Kael speculates that Morath may be their first or last battleground, and I definitely feel that this is for a big battle taking place there probably sometime soon.
Soon or at the end, the beginning or the end, either way, same. When Kael speculated that, I was like, yep, there's going to be the Battle of Morath.
Yep. She also goes on to state that the king has a cavalry of Iron-Teeth witches, 3,000 strong, who have been training to ride wyverns in the Varian Gap. Aelin realizes that in addition to the witches, the soldiers gathering south of Otterlin were likely to cut off any alliance between Terrasen and the southern kingdoms, which is very concerning. Because ultimately, without access to an army of their own, fighting the king's massive army is literally going to be almost impossible. Their very best hope right now is to free their magic so they can at least have that until they figure out how to get access to their army.
Yeah, this is concerning. I agree. But like, they don't have a fucking army. They haven't even left Rifthold yet. They have no idea how many willing and able soldiers they're going to find in Terrasen.
That's true.
Yeah. I know I said this last episode, but it still just annoys me when I think about it. This entire series has taken place in Rifthold, except for the brief stint in Mistward and Wenland. We have no idea what the world looks like outside of this. I mean, I guess other than Morath of the Witches, but we haven't been to Terrasen. What fucking army? There's nothing. There's nothing and no one. And I'm spiraling and we're all going to die.
Trust the process.
I don't like this process. It's not feeling good.
So throughout this, Kael's thoughts head to Dorian, and he thinks they needed Dorian on throne. And then he also thinks, say you need Dorian free and alive. If they do manage to figure out how to free Dorian, that could be useful. However, Dorian, like many other magic wielders in Rifthold, is untrained with his magic. And unless the king is dead, what authority does Dorian ultimately have anyway?
Oh, forget if he's dead. At this point, even if Dorian was crowned king, I'm not sure he could stop this. It seems the Valg have infected enough people and have enough of a working operation. They could essentially just act as their own independent entity. I'm actually not convinced the king is not just a puppet being controlled by the now living Arrow one.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, at this point, like, I don't think even if Dorian took over the throne, it would really change anything.
Probably not. Yeah. Adian asks if they thought Kael's father and Aniel knew what was going on, but Kael speculates, though he didn't wear a black ring, he doubted they'd find him a pleasant ally. It also becomes clear that the king and his forces were ultimately waiting for Aelin to make a move. I also thought that after Nesryn gives Adian some letters, it was touching of Aelin to thank Nesryn for all that she's risking, and how Nesryn in return says, "Long live the queen."
Oh, I loved that. That's
definitely a show of solidarity and Nesryn's belief that a future with Aelin Galathinius restored is a future worth fighting for. And I love Nesryn.
Me too.
I love Nesryn. I love Lysandra. I love all of them.
They're know. So great. Except for Dorian.
It's not his fault.
I know, it's not his
fault. He was great before this horrible thing happened to him.
He was okay. I don't get the Dorian love. I don't get why people in the fandom are obsessed with him. I mean, I'm assuming something happened.
I think we're going to find out. I feel like there's more in store for him after, hopefully, he is released from this Valg situation.
We'll see.
Yeah, anyways, we'll see. The meeting ends, and as Kael walks away with Nesryn, he considers an army that could crush any human resistance, but maybe not if they allied with magic wielders. My, how the turntables, Kael.
My, how the turntables.
But for real, I think Kael has finally consciously grasped the gravity of it all and understands that his best chance of survival, and the survival for every other human in Otterlin, is to ally with magic wielders and fight that fire with fire.
If that is not the ultimate turntables, then I don't know what it is. To hear him do a complete 180 on that, I mean, it's okay. It's okay to admit that you were speaking from a place where you were less informed, but I'm like, okay, Kael, that's a pretty big shift for you.
Aelin storms down the street as she contemplates all of the new information they learned and the implications it had for the lives of everyone moving forward.
As she storms down the street, she thinks, if Elena had thrown her a bone tonight, somehow leading that opium monger to the Sin Eater's temple so they might find it, she wasn't feeling particularly grateful. And let me just say, yeah, the feeling is fucking mutual. Low-key, I am starting to dislike Elena a little bit. A little help here would be nice. It seems like Elena's help always ends up causing more problems than helping solve anything. And also, we found out that her and Gavin were fucking liar. Again, why could she not just tell Selena a lot of this back into your calm? You know, instead she was like, go to Wendland and do what needs to be done. Okay, wow, that's so helpful. And thank you for nothing.
No thanks, Elena.
Hashtag no thanks, Elena. Yeah, seriously though. Not my fave.
Rowan tries his best to get her to talk by reassuring her we'll face this together as we have in the past to whatever end. But out of fucking nowhere, Lorcan ambushes her.
As an overarching thought for this section of the chapter, I just want to say my gut was right that Lorcan isn't necessarily bad. It seems based on this conversation, if we're taking it at face value, which I have thoughts about, and I think he's being truthful actually, that he is concerned about Maeve, but also the future of the world. I think it's almost like he's concerned about Maeve having too much power and how that would affect the future safety and well-being of the entire world. And so I don't think Lorcan's a baddie bad. I think he's definitely morally gray, but I think ultimately he's like a little bit more in the good category.
Yeah, I still need more interaction or more proof that he's not playing them.
True.
But I agree that if we are taking what he says at face value, then the larger scheme of concern for like how things could play out for the future does make me feel that maybe Lorcan's not a baddie bad.
Not a true one. He's not an arrow one. Okay.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
So Lurkin is definitely not here to fuck around, but without magic and with a knife right at Aelin's throat, their options are very limited. In a twist of events, we learn that Lorcan wants the word key and had not been sent to Rifthold on Maeve's orders. In fact, that freaking ring Aelin traded to free Rowan and Maeve's blood oath was very important. Lorcan states, The ring wasn't some family heirloom from Athril. She wanted the keys and the ring, and he refused, and she killed him. While they fought, Brandon stole them away, hiding the ring with Goldrin and bringing the keys here. Didn't you ever wonder why the ring was in that scabbard? A demon hunting sword and a ring to match. We knew Maeve, the baddie bad, and there was no freaking way she'd be gushy and sentimental over a ring without an ulterior motive. Most importantly, Athril's ring turns out to grant immunity from the Valg's power, a ring forged by Mala herself. The bearer of that ring need never fear being enslaved by Wordstone. You handed her your own immunity.
Oh, those words echoed in my mind. Oh my God.
I know, the last words of regret and realizing you made a huge mistake. But yeah, I have nothing but surprises. I don't have any thoughts, just shock and surprise.
Just feelings. Yeah. An actual another jaw-dropping moment for me. Also, quick question for you, Lorene. Does this finally make you feel better about Maeve breaking Rowan's blood oath for just a damn gold ring? I know that has bothered you for quite some time. And so just knowing its true value, does that finally make you feel a little bit better?
Yeah, it did. It makes sense why she was willing to trade Rowan and quit that blood oath. It's because she was freaking playing them the whole time, per usual.
Also, I know this is a weird place to put this note, but I kind of forgot Maeve existed. She was so important in Heir of Fire, and now I'm like, oh yeah, Maeve. What's she up to?
We kept being like, she's a baddie bad, but then meanwhile, we really never actually got a lot of evidence of her doing anything. Like,
that's actually true.
Speculation.
No, you're right. She hasn't actually done anything. The most reprehensible thing she did was have Rowan whipped, but that's pretty normal for the characters in this series. She actually hasn't done anything bad. Well, I guess that's not
until
true.
Now, though.
She did try to steal the rings, or not the ring, the word keys. So
true.
I don't know. We'll think about that later.
We'll think about it later.
There's starting to be a lot of things we're going to need to think about later.
Ultimately, Lorcan fears Maeve will turn herself into a god if she gets the keys, which he believes would destroy her. So, Lorcan was here to bargain. He offers a trade of the ring, which he somehow obtained.
How?
For Aelin's word key, which he plans to destroy along with the other word keys. I don't even understand how that happens. Like, how could Maeve let Lorcan steal that ring? I don't know. That's my one hang up about believing Lorcan's story. How the fuck did you get that ring without Maeve knowing? I mean, she does now, obviously.
To me, it's believable that he was able to steal it. He's been around for hundreds of years. Maeve probably trusts him. And she probably has this false sense of security because of the blood oath. She thinks that Lorcan can't harm her. What is unbelievable to me is that she hasn't sent the rest of the cadre to go and get Lorcan and the ring back. Because she's definitely figured it out by now. Yeah. That's where I'm like having trouble descending the belief.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rowan is immediately suspicious, and I do agree with him that it could easily be a trap. But Lorcan adds, I'm obeying the blood oath because I do not wish to see my queen become a demon herself. So I'm obeying that oath in that regard. Before Lorcan leaves, he says, what I am doing is for the sake of centuries, for eternity. What is immunity worth in a world where your enemies are waiting to shackle you? Where one slip could mean becoming their eternal slave. So ultimately, I do think that checks out Lorcan's explanation. It could still be a trap in some other manner. But based on everything we have learned about what the Valg are doing, I am more inclined to believe that Lorcan, at minimum, will uphold the trade if Aelin agrees. Overall, though, I don't think obviously giving him a word key is a good idea, because even if he does what he says he will do, we just don't know enough about how the word key's power works and how it influences people. So who's to say that Lorcan wouldn't end up corrupted and do the same thing that the king and Maeve's intending to do if she gets a hold of it?
I agree. I like your point about how the word key might affect him, even in ways he might not be aware of. For whatever reason, overall, my gut here just says that Lorcan is being genuine. Now, is he a pawn being used by Maeve and he doesn't even realize it? Possibly. It also makes me wonder, how the fuck Lorcan thinks he's going to destroy a word key. To my understanding, nobody was able to do it. Nobody knows how to do it. And Lorcan thinks he's going to do it. So that does give me some pause when I think about this exchange. The last thing I want to point out is what Lorcan says. For some reason, it's always fucking Lorcan that brings this up. For eternity, Maeve will send the others, to hunt you, to kill you both. Let tonight be a reminder of your vulnerability. You will never know peace for a single moment, not one. And even if we don't kill Aelin of the Wildfire, time will. And once again, a question of Aelin's mortality. And I know we've talked about this, but it's really starting to become a very serious concern for me. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole about this again. But this is like the third time Lorcan's brought it up. Every time he sees them, he's like, she's going to die. You're an idiot. She's going to die. Yeah. And they never address it. So I don't know, but it's really bothering me.
That's true. Yeah. It is Lorcan every single time.
It is Lorcan.
This is like Lorcan's greatest concern.
Lorcan is trying to rain on everybody's parade.
Back at the apartment later, Aelin can feel the wrath still rolling off Rowan as he leaves to take a bath. That moment with Lorcan had clarified for Aelin that it would be a shame if he never knew, if she never told him how she really felt. When Rowan emerges from the bathroom, they finally have an overdue chat about their feelings in bed. Finally get some real emotion out of minimalist Rowan, and he admits that he'd missed her so much in Wendelin that he went out of his mind. And his quote was, "I kept thinking about how you might never know that I missed you with only an ocean between us. But if it was death separating us, I would find you. I don't care how many rules it would break. Even if I had to get all 3 keys myself and open a gate, I would find you again. Always." I will not be silenced about my theory. So here is my episodic mentioning of how going crazy out of your mind from separation and being blinded with fury at the threat of someone dying is very characteristic of something SJM likes to do for her mated characters in her books.
Okay. I will say this kind of language does scream mates. It also seems pretty generic to general fae male possession alpha-hole bullshit.
That's
okay.
There. Yeah.
But again, time for my episodic retort. How can you have 2 mates? I promise I won't say that again in this episode. Also, I want to point out that this feels like a bit of foreshadowing for me that something may happen to Aelin and Rowan will have to burn down the world to get back to her.
I didn't remember. I hadn't thought about this. I think last episode at something he had said. I can't remember exactly what it was, but
yes,
there's these small little comments about how he's always like, to whatever end. Like,
to whatever end, I'll burn down the world for you.
To you. I will find you. And I'm like, are you trying to say that something is going to happen to Aelin? Which, given that she's our fated protagonist, I guess I wouldn't be surprised by that.
I think this is meant to set us up for a story arc where something happens to Aelin and Rowan has to fucking burn it down to get her back. And I'm here for it. That touch her and die energy.
Yeah. So the next sequence of events did melt my soft little heart, even if I found it weird because I'm not fae and have no animalistic instinct at all. Regardless, the message is the same. Aelin wholeheartedly trusts Rowan and is showing him how she feels in return when she lets him graze his canines along her neck.
Ooh.
But there was still no damn kiss. Okay?
Nothing.
I don't know if this constitutes slow burn romance. I'm pretty sure it does. It definitely feels like it. I was internally screaming when Rowan says, "I want to take my time with you. This apartment has very thin walls. I don't want to have an audience." I make you moan.
Woo! And her response was identical to mine. Oh, by the word, she was in trouble. And I was like, I also want to be in trouble with Rowan. Woo, It's getting hot in here. Oh my gosh. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting it to go from "don't touch me like that" to "I'm going to make you moan." You know what I mean? That's a pretty big swing. I'm not mad at it, but I was like, okay, this is where we're at now.
Oh my gosh, totally. So they do exercise some self-control and roll away from each other. Before going to bed, Aelin thinks, oh, she was in so much goddamn trouble. And I was like, ha ha.
I didn't realize how desperate I was for some spicy romance because I was giddy reading this. It was like 1:30 in the morning. And I was still smiling, giggling like an idiot. I'm still smiling now. Like, I actually want to go back and reread this. I'm just like, oh, I miss the spice. Man, I miss the spice.
Who would have thought?
Right?
Sure enough. Okay, chapter 53. This was very short. So the thing that stuck out to me about this chapter with Dorian is that there has been a shift in how Dorian experiences the Valg in him. We know it's been several weeks of Dorian enduring the torture of being inhabited by a Valg prince, and it seems that he has now succumbed to the Valg. There are several lines that indicate this, including the despair coming from the man. It was intoxicating. It was strength. It was life. But right after that, he thinks if he got the chance, he would find a way to end it. For now, this was eternity. This was birth and death and rebirth. I don't know what the experience has been for other people, but generally it seems like most of the Valg-infected hosts were just full of despair, like pretty much the entire way. This is consistent with what happened to Dorian at first, but now he seems to be the first person that we know of to actually transition over to enjoy what's happening. I say that with a question because I don't really know how to describe like what's happening. We don't know enough about what actually happens to everybody, especially towards the end of their life. Typically, most of the people that we've met and talked to that have been infected by Valg were ultimately killed. So we don't have any first tier evidence from them. But I also wonder, is this shift because of Dorian and his particular power or lineage? Was he able to kind of endure it and now it's turned? I don't know.
As you said, I don't think he's really enjoying it. I think he is just resigned to this external existence. It's a little bit of, if you can't beat them, join them. And you have to imagine being constantly tortured and in agony literally 24/7. That would wear anyone down very quickly. And since he can't even commit suicide to end it, I think embracing this existence is just really a coping mechanism. He's like,
yeah,
do I either live in endless torture and agony and despair, or do I just embrace this new existence until he can figure a way out?
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thought that I had, now that we know KALTAIN's power was blended and crafted into something new, we see what she ended up doing in the next chapter. I wonder if something similar will happen to Dorian. Is he going to destroy the Valg in him, but ultimately end up becoming corrupted by the word stone in some manner?
Oh.
Or to take like a positive route, perhaps this gives us hope to know the Valg in him can be destroyed because KALTAIN did it.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. And it would stand to reason if KALTAIN had enough power to do it, Dorian definitely would, because Dorian is extremely powerful. I mean, he's pure power that can be wielded to his will.
Right.
So if he can just find a way to access that within himself, I like that thought.
But also, I am concerned because with KALTAIN, I don't think the KALTAIN that we know of or like previously knew is the one that is still left. And we'll talk about that next because we're literally about to dive into that. But yeah. I don't know. Lots of questions. Moving on to chapter 54. Honestly, with the way things are playing out for the witches, I can't say that I blame Aline at all for continuing with her plan to escape.
Oh, I'm out of there.
As soon as that supply wagon arrives. But after snarling at a letter that she'd received from Granny B, Manon announces that the 13 were to fly to a forest in the north and would be gone for at least 2 days.
And I just want to give myself a little pat on the back and some validation. My first thought was like, ooh, the Oakwald Forest. And I was happy because I was right. And I don't care that it was literally revealed on the very same page. That's where they were going. I was like, ooh, I figured something out before it happened in the book. I'm so mad at myself because I was like, oh, it has to be Oakwald. And I was like looking at the map. And then I went back to the chapter and I was like, oh, it's literally right there.
Right
so I
there.
did all of that for nothing. So I'm just going to validate myself here.
Thede definitely is a little bit scared at the prospect of being left in Morath without the protection of the witches, but ultimately she thinks she wasn't a witch. She'd be escaping soon. She doubted anyone here would really think twice about her disappearance, so she lies to promise that she would lie low anyway. I don't blame Elite for wanting to leave, but realistically, she's probably not going to make it that far at all.
Oh, no.
Before she's found. I kind of get the sense that even if she did leave, someone in the 13 would end up going to find her, or one of the Duke's men could definitely find her pretty quick. She's barely got any money or supplies. She's got a crippled foot, which is going to stand out and slow her down, which that's not her fault. No offense to her. But I was like, you're not going to get away very quickly.
She literally cannot run away. And also her plan is so transparent. She can either brave it in the forest or she's on a supply wagon. It's going to be very easy and obvious to figure out what her plan was. And I don't know, maybe one of them will hop on a wyvern, fly for 6 minutes and catch up to the wagon. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Anyways, we have a little time shift. So 3 days go by, and then we switch to Manon's perspective as they prepare to leave for said meeting. Based on Granny's letter, Manon thinks it was as if she hadn't received any of Manon's messages. Why is that what you're going to assume? In addition, we learn that the meeting is taking place in the Oakwald Forest, and from this meeting, we will definitely learn what the High Witches had been crafting for the king. But I also find it interesting that Dorian is going to be there as well. Not even the tiniest bit suspicious of Granny, Manon decides that at least she would be able to tell her grandmother the truth of what the king and the Duke were doing to the witches. I've had it with Manon. This is so annoying.
You've had it.
Granny is totally up to something and has different plans for the witches than what she's telling Manon. I would honestly bet that she's been in on this experiment the entire time. Plus more. So
yes. I just don't understand how she still thinks Granny cares at all. She is in cahoots with the king. I cannot stress that enough. And how does she not get that? No. I feel like the very first time that the Duke revealed to Manon that Granny Blackbeak and the other witches were working on a weapon for the king, she should have been like, oh, my grandma had not been forthcoming with me. Maybe I should not trust her. And instead she's like, obedience, loyalty, those were the coveted characteristics of a Blackbeak. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sick of it. We're sick of it.
I did find it interesting that the wyverns also had special armor crafted for them. Just from a battle perspective, it is pretty smart to protect them. Tensions are high among the 13 as Manon ignores all of them, but she still hadn't made a decision about which coven she would hand over to the Duke next. We know that there have been several mentions of monstrosities and other creatures that the king is creating, and according to some intelligence from the shadows at Unbriar, one of those monstrosities had been spotted flying through the night sky, and they were described as lean, winged creatures with twisted human forms. I am willing to bet that those creatures are what was birthed from breeding with the Yellowlegs coven, which is completely terrifying because if that's true, then not only was the birth process super quick, but apparently they are now fully fledged creatures already as well.
I thought it was just something he made, he made the wyverns, but it totally could be.
Oh, yeah, I guess we don't know. I just felt like because it said twisted human forms.
That's fair.
And I'm like, Manon figures there were more horrors and Morath to come before launching into the air with the Braxos. This next scene was definitely one of my favorite ones because we finally get perspective from Lady KALTAIN herself.
And this was yet another reveal that made my jaw drop. Don't sleep on Lady KALTAIN. Do not.
Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. KALTAIN first complains of the ache from the scar on her arm, which always ached more than the collar, more than the cold, more than the Duke's hand on her, more than anything that had been done to her. Only her shadow fire was a comfort.
Once again, scar alert. We've talked about this several times, but something about that scar is significant, and this also seems to confirm that.
Most surprising is the fact that KALTAIN had not given in to the Valg prince inside her. Instead, she's actually fought back. Basically, we learned that her shadow fire had developed slowly over time in what she calls a cocoon of darkness. Long ago, when she was younger, she actually had flames of gold crackle at her fingertips before one day they just vanished. This detail is what made me wonder if she was related to Mala distantly or somehow inherited that firepower. Also, the vanishing of her flames likely coincided with the disappearance of magic, timeline-wise.
Yes. And I wondered if maybe she's related to Aelin somehow or a distant descendant of Brandon. Remember that firepower is extremely rare. This would make
Right.
I heard now only the third character we've met that had it. If you're including, I just forgot her name, SR from the Untitled bonus scene.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even her power was extremely limited. So.
Mm-hmm. KALTAIN is definitely a badass regardless, because bit by bit, it says she stole morsels of the otherworldly creature until one day she leapt upon it, tearing and ripping with her shadow fire until only ashes of malice remained, because it did not like fire of any kind. Lawless fire is one of the few magical things we know of that can combat the Valg, but definitely interesting that KALTAIN has something similar, and that this new version of her fire is still something that the Valg fear. Over time, she learned more about her flame and observed how it bled into the thing in her arm and reemerged as shadow fire. The thing spoke to her sometimes in languages she had never heard, that had maybe never existed. This is another detail that feeds into my earlier big idea that KALTAIN has been exposed to like a word key, and that's how her power was transformed. But I don't know, it's just like, what does it mean?
I know we kind of talked about this earlier in our big conversation about KALTAIN, but when it specifically says how it bled into the thing in her arm, obviously that would be wherever her scar is. And like I mentioned earlier, there has to be a physical something in her arm, like a word stone. And maybe that's similar to how they're breeding the witches. I have a feeling we're going to find out, I think probably pretty soon, since this is like becoming a pretty pressing plot point.
So the other thing that was concerning to me is that she'd forgotten the name she'd been given, but it made no difference. She had only one name now: Death, Devourer of Worlds. Oh my God. I don't even know what to make of this. I am honestly kind of inclined to believe that KALTAIN has now turned into a Valg, or like a new entity almost, or she's just becoming like a whole new type of powerful being. All I can say is that the KALTAIN we knew in the past is no longer in there, but she did defeat the Valg in her. So like, what is she? What's happened to her? Who is she now?
Badass. That's what she is, okay?
Are you not concerned, though, when she says,
I'm totally
Death, Devourer of Worlds?
Like, yeah. That is some very Valg-like language. Mm-hmm. It's just so crazy to see the juxtaposition between KALTAIN now and how she was in TOG, where she was obsessed with getting Dorian to notice her. And I'm like, wow, how the turntables.
Oh, do you think maybe she's become like a Valg queen? Is she going to be like the first Valg queen?
Ooh, that would be crazy.
Which actually, now that you think about it, because back in TOG, her whole goal was to become queen.
Yeah.
But what if she does become a queen? What if she's a queen?
She's going to be Erewhon's queen.
I don't know, but it's crazy. Cannot compute.
Not liking it. Let's go back to Roland and Aelin flirting again.
Yeah. Speaking of which, chapter 55. The next morning, things are amiss, and everyone is sure they were about to be ambushed. But shockingly, it's Evangeline with some really terrible news. Truly, fuck Arabin. Because how in the hell does this weasel always get the last word? Meaning Arabin had sent out a letter to the king as part of his will that disclosed the truth about Lysandra's bloodline. And now they had taken her.
So this was actually foreshadowed in a small way earlier in the book. In fact, Lysandra was the one who told Aelin that Arabin was looking into all of the clients' bloodlines to trace who had magic. She even warned Aelin to be careful because Arabin's research would put her in jeopardy. So now I'm like, oh my God, duh. How did it not occur to me that he would also look into Lysandra's lineage? Also, I wondered, does this mean Arabin knew who her father was? Because he would have had to trace her lineage, her bloodline. Obviously, he's not alive, but I did wonder.
I wonder if that research is stashed somewhere. Like maybe he has kept it locked away somewhere.
So.
Aelin immediately realizes this had been Arabin's final card and that he had known about Lysandra and their friendship this whole time. Amid the panic, I did find it really sweet that Rowan scoops up Evangeline in his arms and comforts her. Daddy Rowan!
That is not the kind of Daddy Rowan I want right now, okay?
It's cute. Oh, it's really cute. Shortly after, Kael and Ezran also arrived to inform them that they'd learned that the meeting between the king, Dorian, and the witches was taking place in the Oakwald Forest tomorrow, and then there was now one new prisoner being delivered to Morath.
Okay, so I think this is obvious. I guess when I wrote this, I was confused. The new prisoner is Lysandra being delivered to Morath, right? And then they're going to ambush the prison wagon to Morath. Okay. I just want to make sure I was on the same page on that.
Borderline panicking, Aelin insists Kael and Ezran needed to get Lysandra from the tunnel since the Valg wouldn't notice them as humans. Fortunately, Ezran says, we will get her back. We will save her. Together.
Kael initially says they should use this time to set up an ambush instead, but then Kael notices the look on Aelin's face and how her eyes go to the scar she left on his cheek the night Nehemia died, and he realizes what she is thinking about. And then he looks at her and he tells her, never again. I just really loved that moment. We talked about this in an earlier chapter, but they are really trying to turn over a new leaf in their relationship, and I'm really happy.
Yeah.
I know they can't erase the past, they can't go back and undo it, but I hope that this is Kael's redemption arc for Aelin, that he earns her trust back and she realizes that his intent was never to cause Nehemia harm or anything like that. He just made the decision that he could at the time with the information he had, and that he's trying to do better this time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I felt like this was a full circle closure moment for the two of them over the past, and how they've come to a point now where they both agree together that they weren't going to let the king take another person from them again, no matter like who it is. So moving on to chapter 56, our final chapter. A few hours later, the group meets at a ramshackle inn to discuss Lysandra's rescue plan and the king's meeting.
Oh, as soon as I saw the word inn, I was like, is it time for there's the only one bed at the inn trope? But then I remember they already sleep in the same bed, so it doesn't really matter. Also, I thought it was hilarious how once again, Adian is the fifth will. Rowan and Aelin together, Kael and Ezra together, and Adian all by himself. Alone at the end.
I wonder if Adian's gonna get like a little partner here.
Oh, he's totally gonna get a love interest. Yeah, absolutely he is.
I hope so, yeah. He deserves it. The specific location of the meeting within the Oakwald Forest was the Temple of Themis, which sat on a rock in the middle of a ravine and was accessible only by 2 footbridges. They also figured the witches would be arriving that night under the cover of darkness.
Also, I think it's important to note that this is the second time the god Themis, I forgot how we said it last time, Themis has been mentioned. The first time was in Lysandra's chapter when she killed Erebin, described, a blessing of Themis, goddess of the wild things, who had once watched over her as a shapeshifter who never forgot the caged beasts of the world. And it's a little ironic because Lysandra is quite literally a caged beast right now. Honestly, I took this as a good omen that they will successfully rescue Lysandra. I feel pretty confident that it's going to go well. This is just a nice little world building tie-in.
Ooh, I love that. Aelin decides if Lysandra was wearing a ring, then she would be the one to make the call about what to do. But I did think it was really important that she leaves the decision of what to do about Dorian to Kael. I think it is an olive branch on Aelin's part, but it's also a show of respect because ultimately Kael has the most investment in Dorian's future. In the same way that she gave Rowan the right to decide what to do about Lorcan, she is now trying to do the same for Kael. I think she understands that she is not the focus of those relationships and thus shouldn't be the person to decide what happens to those lives. And I do think that shows growth on Aelin's end, considering early in the book she felt that the only option left was to kill Dorian. But
yeah, I was really surprised she said this because up to this point she has been very clear that Dorian needs to be killed. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I think she's lying. I think if she gets the chance to kill Dorian, she absolutely will. I think she wants to let Kael make the decision, but in reality, she cannot. It would be devastating for the future of Aurelia.
Right. Oh no. Just when they're like having a nice moment and repairing everything, that's gonna just blow all of that right up. So
we'll see how it plays out. I think she's hoping that it won't come to that, the decision will be taken out of her hands through the events that transpire.
Like,
but if
maybe
push comes to shove,
is gonna see, maybe Kael is going to realize too late, and he's like in the situation with Dorian directly. He can't get to it. He sees it, but then Aelin ends up coming into play or something and, I don't know, doing whatever. So fortunately, Aelin is finally taking advantage of the super important wordmark book, and she decides everyone would paint themselves in word marks as she had done for Adian's rescue mission. They also decide to leave the king for now until they knew for sure they could kill him and neutralize Roland with minimal risk. But Lysandra was ultimately going to be the priority for now. Finally, they planned to arrive just before the meeting was set to start to find advantageous spots and scout the area for sentries to minimize how much time the witches would have to smell them out. And ultimately, this is all just so risky. And I don't know why this came to my brain, but I was like, wow, they could really use an invisibility cloak.
Or if they could freaking shift into their animal forms to disguise themselves, that would be really great.
Oh,
literally any help. Maybe not from Elena. We don't really need your help right now. Someone who can actually be helpful. That would be great.
Yeah, get out of here, Elena. With the details of the meeting discussed, Nazrin and Chaol grab lunch, and Aelin makes a joke about how they could have used Lorcan's help if not for the fact that he was a psychotic bastard, which I thought was funny. This does, however, prompt a discussion of what Lorcan would do if he discovered Adian's lineage, and Aelin also asks Adian if he wants to meet Gavriel one day. I do feel pretty strongly that Adian is going to meet Gavriel for sure at some point, but his comments also lead to a discussion of whether the cadre would actually help. Rowan figures the only reason Maeve would send Ave is if it benefited her plans in whatever game she is playing. Also in this discussion, we get another mention of the little folk, as well as the fact that most of the Fae in Oakwald Forest were wiped out by the king and any survivors were likely stuck in their animal forms. Now that the little folk are mentioned again, and this has been a few of many times that they have, I could definitely see them coming into play to help Aelin in some way, because we know that they've been watching her for years, it seems like. Also, if they can free magic, then any remaining Fae would be able to shift and access their magic. And I could see those Fae that remain coming into play. But we also can't forget about all of the stags that exist in the forest.
Ooh, I think you're right. Chaol also says the king wiped them out too thoroughly. I would bet any survivors are stuck in their animal forms. I think this is 100% foreshadowing that a lot of Fae, Brandon, are trapped in their animal form. Now, whether they'll help or not, I don't know. But I feel like that was intentional placement and foreshadowing for what's going to happen when we free magic. Man, I can't wait till we free magic.
Brandon. So eventually they do all go to bed, and Rowan and Aelin share a room. Steamy.
I am here for the steamy flirting. That is all.
Rowan assures Aelin they'd get Lysandra back and not to worry about anything happening to him, which is all fluffy and cute and stuff. But then her thought about starting down this road with Rowan when every other man she'd let in had left some wound, and one way or another, accidentally or not, is heard by Rowan, who responds, "When we get back, remind me to prove you wrong about every other thought that just went through your head."
Ooh, literally, I'm strippers.
We have an advancement on the mind-to-mind speak. Typically, we've only heard of them explicitly sharing a mental conversation with each other or exchanging looks that the other just knows the meaning of. This is the first time, I think, where one of them responds to something that the other didn't intentionally send out to them or allow them to see, or whatever takes place when they're mind-to-mind speaking. You guys already know my thoughts about that, but we've advanced. Okay, this is a new level to whatever this mental connection is. They have a teasing conversation that once again has us all shouting at them to kiss, but I did really love Aelin's thought where she thinks she'd get through tomorrow, regardless of what happened. She wasn't alone, not with him, and not with Adian also beside her.
I'm sorry. We are not just going to glaze over the fact that he said, "I'll even let you decide how I tell you, with words or with my teeth and tongue." Excuse me. Rowan has no business being this hot when they are in such grave danger. It's not right. Also, I am kind of shocked at how good Rowan is at flirting. He's like really good at it. Okay.
He's had
Just
300
raise the
years of
price.
experience. Okay.
Hey, that doesn't mean anything. I don't think Morgan's
Fair
that good at flirting. I'm going to say that, okay? I'm not sure, but I don't think he is. And last but not least, I freaking died when Rowan dumped a literal pitcher of cold water over himself. That was too much. I was cracking up. I was like, well, this was a nice way to end this set of chapters after all the bad news.
It was just such a perfect little detail to insinuate the vibe of what was going on. And
we knew the vibe.
To come and stuff. So I agree. It was hilarious. But anyways, we have now finished our analysis and now we just have our favorite moments to share. So my two first favorite quotes were from the scene with Lysandra and Aelin. My first one from Lysandra was when she says, "Of course I like luxury. You think I don't love these gowns and jewels? But in the end, they're replaceable. I've come to value the people in my life more," which is very sweet. And then on the other hand, we have Aelin with her funny little lines. I just thought this was hilarious when she says opium addicts are piss poor employees. And then Nesrin's just like, she makes good bread. Like, what can I say?
I loved Adian and Aelin's conversation when Adian says, "The point is, I should have been there then, but I am here now. I'm healed and let me share this burden." I loved that.
And then similarly, this one was from Rowan. And it was when he said, "If it was death separating us, I would find you. I don't care how many rules it would break. Even if I had to get all 3 keys myself and open a gate, I would find you again. Always."
Similarly for Rowan, when he's thinking about all that Aelin has endured, especially in Dovir at the hands of the overseers, and he thinks about, sometimes how she gets scared of the dark, he thinks his fire heart shut in the dark. And something about that, it just punched me right in the gut. I was like, oh, his fire heart.
I think it's so cute because Aelin's mom, Evelyn, had called her fire heart.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just like a really
special.
Nice term of endearment.
Yeah.
And then my next one, this was a funny one from Aelin. And she thinks, honestly, it was an effort not to leap after him and rip that damn towel away. Maybe she should make Adian go stay somewhere else just for a night.
She should have.
About how Adian's always there. And then I keep thinking about the third wheel comment you made about him. And it's like, oh, Adian is really she's just always there.
To totally pivot, the Erewhon revelation. I mean, come on.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Come on. I'm still reeling.
News. Yep. I also liked one from Nesrin when she says, "We will get her back. We will save her together."
I also had one from Nesrin. "Long live the queen." I loved that.
My next two are funny, and they're from the inn scene. And the first one is Aelin, because we know she loves luxury, and she says, "The bed's lumpy. I hate cheap inns." And then, of course, at the very end, when Rowan goes to the bathroom and it says, "The sound of splashing filled the room," as Rowan dunked the pitcher of cold water over himself.
Oh my gosh. Yes, totally. Totally. I had 2 more very similarly related. The first is Aelin's response when she says, "Oh, by the word, she was in trouble." And I like when she's in trouble with Rowan.
We're in trouble too, I think.
Oh my God, we're in trouble for sure. And then I love when he said, "I'll even let you decide how I tell you with words or with my teeth and tongue." Oh, I'm literally blushing now. I think I'm going to go listen to this set of chapters again for research purposes, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. To end us on a cute note, I like when Aelin thinks she'd get through tomorrow, regardless of what happened. She wasn't alone, not with him and not with Adian, also beside her.
Oh.
And anyways, that now concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and check out our social media pages to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today. So stay nerdy.
Live a little.
And we'll catch you all next week for Queen of Shadows episode 9. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers.
Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast.
Oh, shit. I'll get used to that, I swear. Okay, do it again.
Okay.
But all she got was immeasurable. Oh my gosh. But damn, if Rowan in his towel dirty talking a day. Wait. But damn if Rowan talking dirty. Wait, I can't do it now. Dang it. Okay. See, it got me so excited I can't even focus. Just thinking about it.
Distracted.
The supply wagon to be arriving any day now. You like that?
Chapter 53. That caught me off guard.
Listen, I started typing and I was like, you know what? It's always the same. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put, if you know, you know.
Wielded it. I don't know. That's probably
When they wielded it. Whatever. We'll think about that later.
You have a thought.
I do.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay.